The following is a presentation from the Greece Historical Society. The second Tuesdays of the month programs from the Greece Historical Society are sponsored by members of the Greece Historical Society and by the sponsors of advertisements in the newsletter. Space for today's program is sponsored by the Greece Central School District's Transportation and Support Services Facility. Space for tonight's program is provided by Greece Arcadia High School. A Brief History of Wegmans, presented by Gary Harris. Recorded Tuesday, January 14th, 2025.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Greece Arcadia. My name is David Richardson. I'm the Executive Director for Student Operations here at Greece Central. It's great that you're here tonight to come out on this very cold, wintry, frigid night for this wonderful presentation that we are looking forward to. How many former Wegmans employees do we have out there? A few hands. How about Chase-Pitkin employees? A few Chase-Pitkin employees, maybe. Well, I'm excited that you're here. I'm looking forward to Mr. Harris's presentation. A few housekeeping notes. Bathrooms is exit to your rear, to the rear of the auditorium. Towards the main entrance of the school is the bathrooms. In the event of an emergency, you can exit out the rear of the auditorium or to your right, my left, will get you immediately outside. Before we turn it over, I would like to introduce Mr. Jeremy Smalling. He is our newest superintendent here at Greece, and he would like to say welcome as well. Jeremy.
Good evening, thank you. As Dave said, my name is Jeremy Smalling, and I am the new superintendent as of January 2nd. So things have been going great. Doing a great job so far. Yeah, right. I know that you're not here to listen to me speak, so I don't want to take a lot of time. But I do want to just welcome all of you to Arcadia. For all of us in Greece, it really is special for us when we have events like this and we can invite community members into our schools across the district. So to know that there's a basketball game here tonight that I'm going to go over and see, but to be able to come in and welcome all community members here today into our schools, I just thought it was important for me to come here and say hello. I will make a pitch to everybody. Part of my plan as I come in as a new superintendent, I have an entry plan. And part of that is to get feedback from all stakeholders. So part of my plan is we're developing a survey right in the middle of just finalizing that. And for those of you in Greece that have received a good news letter that I think comes out to all community members, probably, I think we're working on the final draft of it right now, probably go out in a week or so. There'll be a survey in there. And the survey questions are designed for our students, our staff, parents, and for community members. So if you do receive the good news letter, please feel free to take some time and to give us your feedback. We'd love to hear it from our community members. So welcome, thank you. It sounds like it's going to be a great show. I do remember Chase-Pitkin. We were running around it, but when you said that, it was like a blast from the past. I miss going there. That was a great place. But thank you, everybody. Enjoy tonight, and we look forward to seeing you around the community. Take care.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'd like to introduce Bill Sowers, the president of the Greece Historical Society. Bill puts in a lot of work to make these events happen. And to the volunteers like Pat, who can record these events and put them on the website. So if you go to just do a Google search of Greece Historical Society, you will find a wealth of resources in previous events like these that may interest you about things throughout the town of Greece. Greece is very near and dear to my heart. I grew up in the Cota Vista neighborhood, graduate of Athena, later on a principal at Athena, and now working at district office with Greece. So I'm excited that you're here. And without further ado, Mr. Bill Sowers.
It's nice to see so many people. For you, everybody that doesn't know about us, we are a totally non-volunteer, non-profit historical society, and we are chartered by the State Education Department. And and as such, we're actually part of the state university. So I was thinking we could put a SUNY Greece on our museum. I'm not sure that, anyway, we got a couple programs coming up. Next month is Unsung, She Unsung, and it's going to be about Rochester women who you've never heard about, but who have really made a big contribution to the community. In March, it's going to be What's Your Game? The history of gaming, board games. And in April, will be Before Jackie and the history of the Negro Leagues in Rochester. And in May, for those of you who know Marie Poignan, who's quite the author of local history, especially Salat history, and she's co-author of our Pioneer Families book. She's going to talk about the history of Holy Cross Church on Lake Avenue. So our presenter tonight is Gary Harris. He is a historical asset coordinator for Wegmans, with a 45-year, and is a 45-year employee of the company. He began his career with Wegmans Chase-Pitkin at Ridgemont Plaza in 1979. After working several stores, he moved into the corporate office as a buyer and eventually into employee training. In 1994, he moved over to the food market side of the business and worked in training and employment communications until assuming this role in 2023. I understand he said he almost retired, but they said, boy, do we have a job for you. So welcome, Gary.
Thank you very much. Thanks so much, Charles. Hi, everybody. Hi, good evening. Good to have you here tonight. As Phil said, my name is Gary Harris, and I have been with Wegmans for 45 years. Started in 1979 at Chase-Pitkin, and I tried to retire a couple years ago, right, 23, and it didn't work out. I'm not doing it right, apparently, okay? So I kind of messed up. So they, company apparently tripped over a bunch of old stuff laying around, and they said, oh, we need somebody to figure out what to do with this. And somebody said, oh, we should ask Gary. You know, and they said, well, you know, he's trying to retire, he wants to retire. He goes, oh yeah, but he loves this stuff, right? So let's have him get involved. So I've been starting to look at this stuff and learn, and I'm you know, it's nice to be 70 plus years old and still learning something new, right? You know, I'm learning about archiving and, you know, library science and museology and all this, and so it's very interesting. Plus learning a lot about the history of the company, you know, even things that I didn't know about. So let's get into this a little bit. Let's see. It's gonna work, that can work, it's gonna work. How about now? How about now? Oh, there we are. That's me, historical asset coordinator. Now, you might remember this, okay? Oh yeah, remember we used to do the thing. So I was the guy back in the 90s where we did the radio show on CMF and WHAM on Saturday mornings, the call-in show that John Carr and Jim Salmon do now, okay? They actually started it before I got involved. They were doing it in the 80s when they worked for Grossman's, and then when they backed out of it, they came to Chase-Pitkin and asked if we would do it, and so we did. And so that's, you know, that was what I was doing, you know, a couple of decades ago. And then, as I said, in '94, I got to come over to the food market side and learn a whole new neck of the woods in the business. So how did this thing start? Now, most of you have heard about 1916, right? You're like, oh, okay, remember the 100th anniversary in 2016 and all that, right? Well, you know, where did John and Walter get this idea in 1916 to do this? Well, if you go back before that, John and Walter and their brothers and sisters lived with their family on Fernwood Avenue. Now, Fernwood Avenue is downtown, runs between Goodman Street and Portland, okay? And in that neck of the woods, as you can see, John B. Wegman had this location right here. And his name was on that because he was running a little bit of a business out of his house. And he was selling, his wife was selling produce off the front porch. And they had some groceries and stuff inside in the front room, and they were selling stuff out of there too. So the whole family was involved here, and the whole family kind of looked like this. They had a raft of kids. Yeah, okay. You know, and so they all were kind of involved in helping out and running this business. And John and Walter were the ones that really kind of took off and said, well, we want to do our own thing. And it started with John. And John got started with this, right? And you've seen this one before, right? The ever so popular wagon with the horse, and he would take produce, and then he would take it and drive it around the neighborhoods and sell it to folks. And so he started this in 1916. This was the kind of the beginning of things. And he was doing this for a while, and he decided that kind of like mom and dad had a retail presence, that he wanted to have one of those as well. And so he went downtown, and down on West Main Street, there was this building. Now this is on West Main Street, this is 73 West Main, and it's right between Fitzhugh Street and Plymouth Avenue. And so you're kind of looking at you're looking across the street, looking south, right? On the south side of Main Street. And that famous vaudeville theater, the last time you might remember it was the Capitol Theater when it was finally closed and torn down. But this was, they were doing vaudeville because there weren't a whole lot of movies back in 1916, right? So it was a vaudeville theater. The theater part was all the way in the back. The front part was the box office. So they had a couple of storefront spaces, and so John took over that piece on the left, and he opened up his little shop, which he called the Rochester Fruit and Vegetable Company. Well, Brother Walter figured, well, if we're going to be inside, that sounds like a good thing. I don't have to ride around and drag, the horse and the buggy thing. We can go ahead and work inside a store. And so, okay, I'll join you then, and let's see what we can do. And so they started together then running this business, and then they decided they needed more space. This is a theme that Wegmans goes through over the next 100 years, by the way, in case you haven't noticed, right? We need a little bit more room. And so they decided they move across the street. And so they're down on Main Street, okay, and their current building is over here. Click, 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 there we go. Current building is over here, right on this side of Main Street, and they decide they need to relocate, so they move across the street, okay? And so they move across the street to this location in the St. Bernard's building, and you can see again, they take over the lower right-hand corner now of that building, and over time, they expand within that building, and they take over more and more parts of it. They also start to acquire a couple of other businesses. There's a fruit store down on East Main Street called Mahackey's. They purchased that. There's a grocery store called Seal Company. They purchased that. The lease on the Seal Company goes off in a couple of months after they buy it, so they take that stock and they move it across the street to the East Main Street location. So the 375 East Main becomes their location on the East Main Street side. They eventually expand that store as well. We'll talk about that in a bit. Other locations open up. Of course, we have the 72 West Main we already talked about. They also had a wholesale section on Corinthian Street. They had a spot on Lake Avenue. 58 East Avenue actually backed up to the East Main Street store. Okay? And so the East Main Street store, at 375 East Main, had an entrance over here and it had an entrance on East Avenue, and so you could come into the store from both sides. And then they had a spot at the public market. They started to kind of divide the business a little bit between the wholesale and the retail. All right, let's see, what goes on next? Well, in 1925, we start to see that the brand name of Wegmans starts to look a little bit different. It starts off early in the year. Here's an ad in the DNC that says Rochester Fruit and Vegetable Company over the top, and in small letters down below it says Wegman Brothers. Okay? And so Wegman Brothers was kind of coming into the thing because it was the two brothers and they were running the store, and they said, this is going to be our retail presence. We're going to call it Wegman Brothers. Okay, sounds like a good idea. Well, a little bit later in the year, they run another ad, and now you see it says Rochester Fruit and Vegetable Company, a little bit smaller font, and it says Wegmans. Got an apostrophe in there too. They had to get rid of that in a hurry, right? Everybody says, why doesn't it have an apostrophe? Well, it's a long story. They got rid of the apostrophe and then decided if they wanted to put it back in, it was going to cost several $100,000 at the time, and they said, we're not doing that, just leave it alone. So they left it with just without the apostrophe. By the end of the year, this is the Christmas ad, you can see they have the stylized logo now of Wegmans that they're using, and this is very similar to the logo we use today. The logo we use today was based on this logo from the 1930s. Okay, it's kind of a throwback, but it kind of links, the past with the present and the future. All right, and so now this is where, and you see there's no mention of the Rochester Fruit and Vegetable Company or the brothers, but by now there were actually 4 brothers involved in the business, right? So you still have Walter and John in charge, but the one brother, Frank, came and joined the business, became a store manager, and the other brother, Anthony, whose nickname was Gimp because he broke his ankle when he was a kid, and his beloved siblings decided to call him Gimp for the rest of his life, and so that kind of stuck with him. And so he joined the company, and he was working on the wholesale side. The wholesale side still carried the Rochester Fruit and Vegetable Company name, and then the retail side was going to go with just Wegmans. All right. And so here's Rochester Fruit and Vegetable Company. It's the wholesale division. You probably might have seen this picture in the past of the white trucks all lined up, picking up their produce, getting ready to deliver it to various restaurants and hotels, etc., in the Rochester area. And this is located down on Railroad Street, just right at the end of Railroad Street, just before you hit the public market. So they were able to go down there and pick up their fruits and vegetables from the public market, load them onto the trucks, and get them out and get them delivered. Very cool. All right, we go back to 72 West Main Street, and when we first looked at it, it was a small corner on the right-hand side that they had developed in there. But over time, in the 20s, they ended up taking over that whole first floor. All right, because again, they needed more space. And so they expanded that, took it over. Eventually, they took over the whole building. All right, the third and fourth floors contained a commercial bakery where all the baked goods came out of for all the stores that they were opening. The second floor contained all their corporate offices. And the first floor still had the store in it until they closed that one down and they put more offices in there. This was the corporate offices for Wegmans until 1959 when they opened the corporate offices at 1500 Brooks Avenue, which, you know, today down by the airport, right? And in fact, if you drive downtown today, over on West Main Street, near Plymouth Avenue, that building is still there. And up on the top, just under that cornice up there, you can see, well, you can't quite see it from here, but embossed in the stone, it says Wegman Building. So if you drive down there, we're going to take a spin down, don't go tonight, but you know, during the day it's easy to see. Don't leave right now, come on, sit down. Okay, but you can go down there and you can still see that, it's really kind of cool. Yeah, isn't that neat? Okay, so started to open up a few more locations in the 30s. We had 90 South Clinton, we had Brown Street, we had Monroe Avenue, and we had 409 West Ridge Road. We're going to talk about those a little bit more. But it sounds like, you know, wow, Wegmans is really getting big. You know, they're really taking over the city, aren't they? Maybe not.
Yeah,
Yeesh. Okay? In the 30s, this is what we had. There were 7 Wegman stores, there were 7 Mohegan stores. Anybody ever heard of the Mohegan food markets? You got that? Okay, great. Right back there. American Economy, Loblaws, remember Loblaws, right? Yeah, okay, yeah, still got that. Uncle Sam's, don't have that one on. Red and Whites, I remember, A&P's, I remember, and Hart's, right? We've heard about Hart's markets. Where did Hart's stash 126 stores? What was that all about? You know, well, part of this, of course, is because this is before everybody had an automobile, right? And they would go to the store and load up for a week's worth of groceries and then go back home, right? So you had little small corner stores, right, in almost every block. You know, and people would go and they would get their stuff for a day or two because they had to keep it fresh and then bring it home. And so Hart's had a bunch. Hart's, by the way, turned into Star Market eventually, right? Yeah. Oh, okay. Starting to see a plan here. All right. Let's talk about one of these stores that was opened up. Let's talk about a couple, but this one in particular, South Clinton Avenue. This became kind of the showplace type store. And you know how it is when people come to Rochester and you know, and people want to show them the sites and they take them to Wegmans Pittsburgh or something, right? This is, you know, I don't know if that says something about Rochester or whatever, but you know, we would take them there to show off this kind of cool store. Well, this was like the first one of those that we had because this was kind of above and beyond what was happening in the grocery industry. You had a store that was 20,000 square feet, which was huge at the time. We were kind of getting into the self-service side of things. You used to go into the store and have to walk up to a counter and ask a person to get you a bunch of stuff and wrap it up and then pay for it and go to the next department and do the same thing. Now you were able to walk around with a basket and start putting things in your basket and then go to a central checkout and get checked out. Okay. They had spray mist for the produce. It's like today, right? You go in the produce department, you say, right? And this comes out. They had 1930. Oh, yeah. They're cool. Nobody else had that yet. And they had a 300-seat cafeteria. They decided to put a restaurant in there, and they put that in several of their stores at the time. Really kind of cool setup. So this Wegmans then became kind of the showplace type thing where people in the industry from all around the country that would come to Rochester to see this store, to see what was the latest and greatest in the food industry. So that was something that was getting started. So now we come up to the northwest side of town. Ooh, this looks familiar. Where is this? Okay, so now we're up on Ridge and Dewey, right? This is on the southeast corner, spot where, what's it, the Peppermill Restaurant is now? Yeah, okay. And so this is up there in that corner, 409 West Ridge Road. And again, one of the locations they came out to because of Kodak and all the dense population, people coming out here and moving in. Kodak employees, they said, well, they need some place to buy food, we better find a spot for them. So we moved up over to there. I keep hitting the wrong button. More stuff in the 30s. 1936. This is Walter. This is one of the two brothers. 1936. Walter Wegman passed away. Relatively young, 45 years old, right? And so now, we have these two brothers, Walter and Jack, run the company, and one of them's gone. I'm going to spill water, watch this. Aren't these Wegman bottles weak sometimes? Yeah. Hard to open. Is there anybody we can talk to? Yes, it's Wegman's water, you know. Put that there. Oh, it stands up. Okay, good. So Walter passes away in 1936, only 45 years old. Shortly after that, actually, the following year, another significant thing happens. Walter's son, Robert, okay, graduates from Aquinas Institute, enrolls in the Rochester Division of Niagara University, pursuing a degree in finance, and he comes to work for Wegmans. Okay, he works in the accounting offices during the winter, and during the summer he works in the wholesale division. So he starts learning the business from there. Now, Walter passes away, Bob comes to work for the company, Bob starts growing up. Here we are in the 1940s. Robert Wegman married Mary Beamish. The Beamish family lived over on Long Pond Road, right? And so when Bob and Bob's family lived over in Irondequoit by then. So when they got married, they decided they wanted to move out, got to be close to mom's, you know how that is, right? Got to be close to the wife's family, right? So they moved out to Greece, and they had a house up on Long Pond Road. There is some discussion about the Gordon Howe house, you know, that they had purchased that house in the 60s. Not quite sure if they actually lived in that one or not, but they did live in the house up on Long Ridge Road, or Long Pond Road, right next to where the Greece Assembly of God Church is right now, right? Right by Long Pond there. So married Mary, and they got married at Mother of Sorrows, right? No, Mother of Sorrows, right? Yeah. I used to go to Mother of Sorrows back in my youth. I was long time ago. My dad built a house over on Muriel Drive, off of Lake Meadow by the Thayer Farms, neck of the woods there, right along Long Pond. And so he was a member at Mother of Sorrows for many years, and so that's where we used to go to church, back when I was just a youngster. Okay, so they got married in 42. I guess Bob decided he wanted to do something else, and ended up getting commissioned in the Marines as a second lieutenant, and he ended up going over into the Pacific and working in the supply crew, and he was supplying supplies to all the troops, working in the various locations that they were deployed to in the Pacific from 42 to 45, include places like Guam and Iwo Jima, etc. Okay, so they had to get their stuff. So he came home in 1945, and his Uncle Jack, recommended that if you wanted to learn the business, that he should go to work in the meat department, right? And start, learning the business, you got to go to work in the meat department. You learn the meat department, and then you can learn the other departments. Now, in 1945, the meat department was a little bit different, right? We used to bring in sides of beef, 300-400-pound sides of beef, right? Hanging on a rail, coming into the store, going into the back room, and then they had to be broken down, cut down into quarters, and then, smaller pieces, and then finally into, serving-sized steaks, roasts, or whatever you could put out on the shelf so that people could buy them. It was a lot of work, right? And this was done in each store back then. So Bob went there and he learned the meat business, and then he worked in several other departments. I understand he worked in the bakery department. Is that true?
I'm not sure.
Well, somebody had to train him in the bakery department, didn't they?
My father was bakery supervisor.
Oh, see, her dad was bakery supervisor, and so he had to train Bob Wegman right in the bakery. So good. Well, I'm glad you did, because he did a fine job, you know, with the bakery stuff. So he had to learn it from somebody, right? That's great. Okay, so he worked in the meat department, and 2 years later, he's promoted to store manager in 1947, and he was tasked with taking all the rest of the stores, besides Clinton Avenue and the more modern stores, and turning them all into self-service, okay? And so he was working on that project from then on out. All right, so next, I keep hitting the wrong button, good. 1940s, again, Northwest, dense population, we opened a store at Dewey and Driving Park. Okay, start taking care of, again, more of those Kodak employee customers that are living out there. We opened our first suburban store, 12 Corners, okay? First one outside the city limits, all right? And then in the 1950s, in 1950, Uncle Jack Wegman passes away. And we know what happens next, right? Bob Wegman is asked to be the president of the company. Isn't that great? Well, if his uncle passed away, who asked him to become the president of the company? Nobody, right? Very interesting, okay? When his Uncle Jack passed away, Uncle Jack was not married, had no kids, okay? And so he left parts of his estate to various members of the family, including Robert, but he left a controlling interest in the company to a foundation, the John Wegman Foundation, which still exists today. This foundation he put in place to benefit the Rochester community, both for helping people who are elderly, for youth in education and development, and also benefiting the relationship between labor and management. He wanted this foundation to be run and staffed by representatives from 5 different organizations. 3 of them were religious. One was the Catholic Diocese, the other one was the Protestant Federation of Churches, and the other one was the Jewish Welfare Fund, okay? And then he also had a representation from the Community Chest, what today we would call the United Way, and from the AFL-CIO. Interesting, okay? So, controlling interest was with them. They asked Bob to become president and run the company. He said, well, that's great. I have a lot of great ideas about what the food business should look like. I have a lot of things I want to do. But if I want to do those, I really need to own the company. They said, well, that's great, because we have no idea what to do with a food company. So the foundation was more than willing to sell the controlling interest back to Bob. And he said, well, that's wonderful, thank you very much. Unfortunately, I don't have any money. You're going to have to loan me the money so that I can buy it. And they said, great, no problem, we'll do that. And so they did, and he paid them back. And the foundation is still doing fine. And Wegmans is hanging in there too, okay? So a little interesting piece of the passing of the torch there from the one generation to the other. So Bob takes over the company. A couple of things he wanted to do. One was he realized that he needed to have employees who would hang around for a while, 45 years maybe, I don't know. But he said it's got to be a place where people can make a living. Okay, where they can come and they can enjoy their work, they can make a living, they can plan for the future, etc. And so he does a couple of things. First, he raises wages so that people can have a living wage. He establishes a retirement plan so people can have kind of a forward focus on, you know, what do I do after I'm done working? And he also extends medical benefits to his employees, which was kind of a new thing back then, right? You know, it wasn't all that common. And so all those things kind of come into play, and you know, it ends up kind of making Wegmans a kind of a desirable place for people to work and for people to stay living. All right, 1959, offices again at 72 West Main closed down, and they move everything over to 1500 Brooks Avenue. And as you can see, it says their main offices are there, their warehouse is there, bake shop, frozen food storage, pre-packaging, egg processing. Egg processing was at 1500 Brooks Avenue. They had a guy, the egg guy, for years. This is what he did for a living. Every day, he would drive around to all these different egg farms around the Rochester area. And he would collect the eggs, and then he would bring them back to the central location, and they would candling the eggs, right? You put them under bright light so you can kind of look and see, make sure everything's cool inside, okay? And then they would, you know, separate those out by size, package them up, get them to the stores. Okay, well, that's a little intensive. And after a while, of course, they're opening more and more stores, and it's like it's becoming more and more difficult to gather all these eggs together. So they finally decide, okay, we're going to have to do something different. That's coming up a little bit later, okay? And you all know about the egg farm. Another interesting thing about this, if you see at the bottom there, it says that groups of 10 or more are welcome to come in and visit by appointment. Don't bother calling, that's not going to happen. They don't do that anymore. But the phone number at the bottom is FA8-2550. You remember when phone numbers had the letters, right? Or 865 was University 5, right? And 61 was like Mayfield 1 or something like that, okay? So FA8 is actually like 328, right, is the number. 328-2550 is still the phone number for the main office at Brooks Avenue. If you dial 328-2550, you'll end up in, phone purgatory, right? Press 1 for this, press 2 for that, press 3 for this, find a person's name. But 328-2550 is still our phone number. They didn't ditch that landline like I did, okay? They still got it. I thought that was kind of fun. 1951, they put their first store into a plaza. Instead of having a store right on the street, they put a store in a plaza with a parking lot in front of it, other stores maybe next door to it. That happened out in Irondequoit. 1953, they came out to Northgate. Somebody's like, hey, Northgate, Somebody remembers, I remember that, right, when Northgate was out there. Interestingly enough, Wegmans owned the land that Northgate was built on, but when it came time to build the plaza, they sold the land to a developer so they could develop the plaza. Well, apparently the situation didn't work out quite the way Bob wanted it to, so he said, from now on, we're going to develop our own plazas, okay? And so that's the way things went from there on out. And so in 1954, we opened Eastway, okay? Our first Wegmans Plaza. So this is built by Wegmans and had one of our stores in it. And it's where Alice and I spent there. This is my wife, Alice. Will you say hi to Alice? Say hi. Yeah, please. Right? She deserves that. And so much more. So 54 was the first Wegmans Plaza. And then 1957, first store outside the Rochester Market opened up in Newark. Okay, down Route 31, a little bit east of here. And then, still keep getting that, 1959, our first big store, 40,000 square foot behemoth, opened up in Ridgemont. Remember the big arched roof and everything, right? Was that cool? That was great. Very good. So that was our first big store, superstore. Well, in the 1960s, we also got involved with a private label company called Staff. You have to watch what you name your stuff, don't you? You hear Staff, and the next thing you want to think of is Strep, right? And wonder why I have food that's named Staff? I don't know. Anyway, Staff was a kind of a conglomeration of food processors that got together and they created this private label that they sold to regional food markets so that they could have like a private label kind of an alternative for customers beyond the national brands. And so we did business with Staff for a number of years. And how many remember Staff? You remember Staff label products and buying those? Yeah, okay, good. I do too. The 60s, yeah, everything started to blow up then, right? Hudson Avenue, Mount Hope, Rockport, Goodman, Mount Reed, opened the store called Mount Reed here. And then Scottsville, East Henrietta Road, and then entered into the Finger Lakes, opened a store in Canandaigua. Very nice. 1960s. In 1964, Aquinas and McQuaid played football for the first time against each other. So what? I mentioned Bob Wegmans went to Aquinas, right? And I did too. Not at the same time. I was a little later. But if you go into Aquinas and you walk in the front door and the auditorium's there, next to the auditorium there's a bronze plaque on the wall. And their high honor roll is called the St. Thomas Club, if you're St. Thomas Aquinas, okay? And if you get 90% or more average on a quarters marking, you get on the St. Thomas Club. I made it a couple of times, it's pretty cool. But if you're on the St. Thomas Club, all 16 quarters of your 4-year time at Aquinas Institute, you become a permanent member of the St. Thomas Club. And if you look on the bronze plaque on the wall, as I did some years ago, 50 or so, you will see in class of 1937, Robert B. Wegman, okay, was a permanent member of the St. Thomas Club at Aquinas. Kind of a bright guy, it was kind of cool. So anyway, in 1964, Aquinas and McQuaid played football for the first time. Aquinas had a huge history wonderful history of football, which many of you are aware of. The stadium was one of the largest stadiums in the country when it was built. It was actually, Aquinas Stadium was the first place the Buffalo Bills played football. Their first game was played there. It was a preseason game. That's a little bit of trivia. You're going to hear a lot of that, okay? So Aquinas and McQuaid get together. McQuaid had only been around for a few years. It took them a while to build up a squad that they felt could compete. And so they played against Aquinas. It was thought that Aquinas would win. They were heavily favored because of their great experience. However, McQuaid won. Only by a point, but they won. Turns out the starting fullback on the McQuaid team was a young man by the name of Daniel R. Wegman. Hey, Dad, watch this. Right? So a little father-son rivalry there. It was kind of a cool thing. Okay? To this day, on every 10th anniversary, we just did this last year, Danny hosts a dinner for the members of both teams that played in this game and their families. And they get together and they just kind of reminisce, right? Whoever's left, right? They get together and talk about this. So it's kind of a fun thing. Very cool. In 1967, we decided, instead of chasing around having to find eggs, we were going to open our own egg farm. And so there was an egg farm that existed out in Walcott, New York, east of here, okay? I've been by there many, many times because we go camping out there all the time. And it was owned by the Wadsworth family. And so we bought the egg farm and hired the Wadsworth family to run it. And so we were able to infuse capital in there so that they could build it and grow it so it could eventually supply all of our stores as they grew. Eventually, we were growing so fast we needed more, and so we ended up selling it to another company called the Crayer family, who had multiple egg farms around. And so we moved in that direction, did that. Also in 1967, the Supermarket Institute was an industry organization. It's the predecessor to what we call FMI, or the Food Marketing Institute today. And the Supermarket Institute, they would rotate, leadership in their company to various leaders. And in 1967, they named Bob Wegman their president. And so as their president, he was going to have to deliver the closing keynote address at one of their annual conferences. This particular one was being held in Thailand, of all places, because it was an international company, or an international association. So at any rate, he was scheduled to do that, and it didn't quite happen, right? Because of scheduling and stuff, and translation times, and look, in 1967, if you had a flight scheduled out of Southeast Asia, you got on the plane, right? Okay? So he, they were not able to deliver the speech then. He brought it home, shared it with a couple of people, and put it in a desk drawer. And, we really didn't hear about it much for many years. We'll get to that in a little bit. Okay. Also, 1968, we go into Syracuse. We opened our first store in Syracuse, John Glenn store, John Glenn Boulevard and Route 57, over on the west side of town. Second store is in DeWitt, down on the south side of town.
Yep.
Large store down there. And in the ad that ran for the opening of John Glenn, because it was our first store in Syracuse, Bob Wegman kind of wrote an open letter to the folks there. Okay, and I'll see if I think I can read that. Yeah. All right, it says 18 years ago when I first became Wegmans president, I decided I was not going to build the finest food chain. I was going to build the finest food chain I knew how to put together. The number of stores was not important because I was convinced that my personal satisfaction would come from having the happiest customers, not necessarily the fastest growing chain in the area. I think you build happy relationships by buying the best products you can produce and selling them at the lowest prices possible by keeping abreast of the latest technical developments. I feel also that this first objective is only attained by having a concern for the people who work for you. This means not only paying an adequate salary, but being interested in the whole life of each one of your people. My father and my uncle started Wegmans in Rochester some 51 years ago, selling choice fruits and vegetables from a huckster wagon. And over the years, the business has expanded to 26 supermarkets. Perhaps you shop in some of them, including our Midtown Plaza store, when you have visited Rochester. Our present plan calls for 4 Syracuse markets. More will be built later if you like us as much as I hope you will. So this kind of captures Bob's kind of maturing philosophy about retail, okay? And how he wants to present Wegmans to the public, okay? To his consumers, and to this new market that we're going into in Syracuse. A lot of people there didn't even know who we were. Of course, we've experienced that a lot, you know, as we moved on to other states, et cetera, in different locations. And so this is kind of an example of what there was. And you think about this was back in 1968, right? And this is kind of an interesting way that he put this for our new market in Syracuse. In '69, he was elevated to CEO, and his brother Jim, who had been a store manager in a few locations, was made president of the company. Okay? So, 1970s, fun things happening in the 1970s. This is where we started to diversify, get into some different stuff. We sold gas. Remember gas stations? Right? There was one on Lyle Avenue, there was one at Ridgemont, there was one in Penfield. We had some in Syracuse, John Glenn and all that. Okay? Gas stations. Consumer affairs. Ever remember this lady? Yeah, Mary Ellen, right? Love Mary Ellen. I had a chance to talk with her a few weeks ago. We had to sit down and do a little interview, oral history thing, so she could share some of her stories. And I had a chance to work together with her in a lot of different events and things, and she is a super, super person. But in 1971, she had had a career in the cooperative extension. She had taught for a while, and she was looking for something to do. And so she wrote a letter, and she sent it to two places. She sent it to Star Market, and she sent it to Wegmans. And she said, you should have somebody in your company that acts as the voice of the consumer to the organization. Because there's so many things going on in the food business that customers want to know more about or have a concern about. And as Mary Ellen would put it, she said, well, Bob Wegman called me back. Star Market never did. You take whatever you want from that, okay? Wegman's still going strong. You mean Star Market? No, okay, all right. They had their shot. Okay, so Bob Wegman brings her in, and he starts having this conversation about consumer affairs. What would that look like? And he actually had her write a job description for what a consumer affairs person would do, and paid her for it. And so she wrote the job description, she brought it back to him, he said, this looks great, you're hired. And so she's a unique individual in that she started, you know, this job as Director of Consumer Affairs and pretty much didn't do anything else for the next almost half a century, right? You know, she started as Director of Consumer Affairs and she retired as a Senior Vice President of Consumer Affairs, you know, because the department just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger underneath her, right? She had a whole team of people that were involved in responding to customer input, questions, phone calls, emails, text messages, whatever, you know, as technology kind of moved on. She had another group of people that was in charge of quality assurance, okay, and food safety. Quality assurance people would make sure that the people who manufacture the products that we put our name on are doing it the right way. They would actually go out to those people's factories and do inspections on them, and they would also inspect the product when it comes in to our company. And I also had the sustainability area. Okay, when we started getting involved in being a little bit greener in what we do, and how do we handle that? How do we do that? Talk about that a little bit too. All right. I keep looking at my microphone to press a button, and it's not there. It's over here. Okay. All right. 1973, Wegmans had expanded a couple of their stores at Lyle Avenue and at Pittsford, and they had left the old stores open until they built the new ones, so they didn't have to close it down. Lose business, you know, while they were building the new stores. And they opened up their new stores and they had this empty box, right? You know, this 40,000 square foot empty box supermarket. What do we do with that? And well, this is kind of, you know, mid-70s, you know, the whole home improvement thing is starting to kick in and, you know, home centers are starting to come on board. You know, Home Depot didn't start until 1979, right? But other chains around like Heckinger's and Scotty's and a couple others around the country, we're starting to grow, bring more departments in. So much like a supermarket takes the place of having to go to a bunch of different places to get all the food you need for the week. The home center takes the place of having to go to the lumber yard, the garden center, and the plumbing supply house, and the electrical supply house, and put things all under one roof. And so they opened two stores. They call them Wegmans Fix and Fun Home Centers. Now, they found out that the home improvement business is a little bit different from the grocery business, right? Because when people go grocery shopping, most of the time they have a list, they have a rough idea what they're going to get. They're in your store a couple times a week, they have a rough idea where things are, you know, and they have a rough idea what they're going to do with the stuff when they get home. They're going to make a meal, right? They're going to feed their family. All right, good. When people go into a home center, though, oftentimes they go in there because something's wrong. Something's not working. And they're not quite sure why. They're not quite sure what they might need. They're not quite sure what you have, or where you keep it, or what the heck do I do with it when I get it home. It's a little bit different gig. So the self-service idea in the home center business didn't quite work out that well. So I said, well, we need some expertise. Where are we going to get that? Well, turns out there was a place to get that. There was a company called Blit-Rite Chase-Pitkin. Their roots go all the way back into the 1800s, right? Chase Brothers Nurseries. William Pitkin was, he was a mayor of Rochester, director of Monroe County Parks, and one of his relations hooked up with somebody from Chase Brothers Nurseries. There was a marriage involved, and the company, became called Chase-Pitkin instead of just Chase Brothers Nurseries. And so now you have Chase-Pitkin as the kind of garden center around Rochester, very well known. And then around World War II, you had another company come up called Blit-Rite Products, and Blit-Rite Wood Products was a lumberyard and a mill company. They would manufacture doors, windows, moldings, right, all that. And so they purchased Chase-Pitkin, and they combined the two companies, and they called it Blit-Rite Chase-Pitkin. They got four names all piled on top of each other. And so I guess they didn't think it was a good idea to call it Wegmans Blit-Rite Chase-Pitkin. That would just be too much. Those signs would be very expensive. So they kind of separated that out. And where do you put the apostrophe on that one? I have no idea, right? So they turned into Chase-Pitkin Home Centers, and that became, as you can see, oh, look, that's the old Mount Reed store. Isn't that cute, right? Okay, and so that's, became Chase-Pitkin Home Centers, and they started converting, as they would expand their stores because they needed bigger stores again, and they would expand the store in the plaza, and then the old store they would convert into a Chase-Pitkin. Okay, that went on. 1975, they started opening Old West. Remember Old West? Buyer Levi's at Old West, right? Yeah, I remember that, okay. So they had those for a while, several of those stores around there. 1979, Danny was named president. His uncle, Jim, retired, okay? He was the president of the company, and so Danny was named president. And then in 1977, we opened our first Buffalo store on Dick Road. That opening was delayed by 2 days. Yeah, right. It's Buffalo. Why would it be delayed? Snow. Yeah. Right. Yes, blizzard, 2-day delay. Finally got the thing open. It's doing quite well. All right. Next one. 1970s. We get away from the staff thing. We decide we want to go to Wegmans brand. Get our own brand, our own label, our own name on it. And of course, there's a bunch of different strategies around doing private label. A lot of times people would, they think of private label and say, oh yeah, they just go to like Heinz and they have them peel the labels off and put their name on it, and then they ship it to them, Well, that adds cost and no value, so let's not do that. Really, what we did was we got a hold of a broker who worked on private label, and they kind of encouraged us to come up with a strategy. What do you want private label to actually be? What do you want it to do? You can put your name on something. What do you want it to represent? And so we decided that we were going to have a strategy where we said, well, there's 3 criteria we're going to have here. First off, it's got to be at least as good as a national brand. It's got to be good quality, right? Okay, now that can be very subjective, I get it. There's people who don't want anything but Helmut's mayonnaise. I understand, that's okay, right? But it's got to be of good quality. If you sell something that's cheaper and it's bad, right, people aren't going to buy it again. So it's got to be good. It's got to be good quality. It also has to be a better economic benefit for the customer, which means the customer's got to save money by doing it, right? And it's got to be a better economic opportunity for Wegmans, right? It doesn't make sense for us to make less of a profit selling something just because it has our name on it, right? So, it turns out if it meets those 3 criteria, then they'll start looking at a formulation where they'll have their chefs and food scientists come together, and they'll come up with different taste profiles and flavor profiles, compare them with others with national brands. So they'll be doing a lot of tasting and stuff inside the company. And I got to tell you, most of the products, every recipe that you see published by Wegmans, the family tries them, right? They have a thing every month. They get together with the chefs and the merchandising people, and Danny and Colleen and Nicole now are sitting around. They're all trying these foods, and if they don't like them, back to the drawing board. If they like it, pass, fine, we'll run it an ad. Okay, so they're very particular about stuff that they put their name on. But this is when it started. Okay, putting the Wegmans brand out there back in the 70s. Then we got involved in sustainability. It started with recycling cardboard. Okay, that was the first thing. And then we started doing food bank donations, right? Because there was a lot of waste, food waste, that comes out of grocery business. And it's like, okay, well, what is, there's some stuff here, ordinarily we would just throw it out, but what if it's something that's still good? It's something that somebody could still use, all right? What can we do with that? And so they said, well, if it's still usable and, and safe, then we could give it away to the food banks. And over the years, right, we've got, 19.6 million pounds of food donated to food banks, 142 million pounds of recycled cardboard and office paper, all kinds of stuff like that. We hired a guy about 10 years ago. He had spent like 20 years in the Air Force, been a mechanic on the fleet of fighter jets. And he came to work for Wegmans, and he ran the fleet maintenance for the trucks. And he started working on reducing our carbon footprint, okay? Because we run diesel trucks all the time. Diesel trucks are kind of dirty. So they started looking at different alternatives. They started looking at compressed natural gas, which has a much cleaner footprint, cleaner source, and decided to start using those. Didn't have quite as much torque, though it was a diesel truck. So he got in a project with Volvo, the truck manufacturer, and Cummins, the engine manufacturer, and American Natural Gas, the supplier, and a company called Helion out of Texas, which manufactured electronic axles to provide additional torque for these trucks. And now these trucks, compressed natural gas trucks, can not only tow a tractor trailer, they can tow a tandem tractor trailer. 2 trailers down the thruway, all the way to Albany. They can be picked up, taken out to Massachusetts, to our stores out there. Or they can, go down south, down Route 81 or 95 or whatever, okay? So a very, very cool thing, reducing our carbon footprint. Within a few years, we'll probably all be on compressed natural gas. Also looking at electric trucks right now. They're not quite ready, not quite there yet, but we're looking at experimenting. The young man, by the way, is Matthew Harris, and he is our son. Yes, thank you very much. He's a good guy. Back in the 70s, also started scanning, right? Bob Wegman went and testified before Congress, right? Convincing them to tell the food manufacturers they should put universal product codes on all their products so that we could be able to scan those at the front end and move people in and out faster, right? It's much more efficient. Remember back when he was talking at Syracuse letter about using technology to help make things more efficient? This is where that came from. And folks in the industry today will say that the only reason we have scanning now is because of Bob Wegman's efforts to get that done. Okay? So that happened then. In '81, we sold Wegmans Food Services. Remember I said we had a retail and a wholesale division? The wholesale division was Rochester Fruit and Vegetable. Then it changed to Rochester Provisions. And then it became Wegmans Food Services. And eventually in 1981 comes along, we said, you know what? We got to stick to the retail side. We're going to do this. All right? And so they sold the food service division. 1982, they established their philosophy. So they had a meeting. This was something going on in the 80s with companies. So they said, well, we need to make a mission statement or a vision or something to hang on the wall where people know what we're all about. It was a really good idea. So, senior leaders of the company, Bob, Danny, Mary Ellen was involved in this, a bunch of other people, lock them in a room for a couple of days with a consultant, to kind of ask them questions and start capturing ideas. And they come up with this statement, okay, which sounds eerily familiar to some of the things that Bob was talking about, right, back in the 60s, where it says that at Wegmans, we believe that good people working toward a common goal can accomplish anything they set out to do. And in this spirit, we set our goal of being the very best at serving the needs of our customers. And every action we take should be made with our customers in mind. We also believe we can only achieve that goal if we first fulfill the needs of our own people. And to our customers and our people, we pledge continuous improvement. And we make the commitment every day to get our best. After 45 years, you too could recite that by heart. There was only one change ever made to that statement, and that was a piece about continuous improvement. Happened about 10 years later. We'll talk about that when we get into that neck of the woods, okay? Moving right along here. Let's see, 1983, we started a 401k program. Thank you very much. I'm still here, though. And we sold Old West. We kind of got out of the clothing business, okay? Backed out of that. 1984, the scholarship program begins. And to date, we have delivered over $145 million in scholarships to over 40,000 employees. We currently have 5,000 employees enrolled in the scholarship program at Wegmans. Education matters to the family, okay? It means something, okay? 1987, for those folks who had less of a shot, okay, at getting into college, they started the Work Scholarship Connection. And they realized that kids growing up in the city needed a leg up, okay? Now, how do we do that? The Work Scholarship Connection would find these at-risk kids, would give them a job at Wegmans, and would also hook them up with a job coach and a mentor, okay? And, you know, in the city schools, back then, that graduation rate was at 50%. These kids are going through this program. It's still on now. It's being run by Hillside Services, and the graduation rate is over 99%, okay, for this. For this particular program, Bob Wegman received the 1,000 Points of Light Award from President George H.W. Bush, okay? And so he, my good buddy Alan Johnson, standing there behind him, were able to receive this Work Scholarship Connection Award. It's really kind of cool. It's very good stuff. 1984, we opened up our test kitchen. It's more of a laboratory than a kitchen, I gotta tell you, okay? You know, you're not gonna go in there and make muffins for everybody, right? The test kitchen is where they bring products in that are being proposed by manufacturers or being manufactured with our name on them, and they bring them in and they test them. They make sure that the ingredients in the actual product are what it says on the label. They make sure that the flavor profiles and the wholesomeness and everything is where it needs to be, okay? And so that's what the test kitchen is about, and so we opened that up in 1984. 1985, hey, remember these?
Home video.
Used to rent videos, yay! VHS. You know, when they first started, we were doing beta tapes, right? Remember beta tapes, right? Because Rochester was one of the 2 test markets for the beta decks, right, when they first came out. And so, you know, I had a beta deck first, right? And then I had to move over to VHS. Terrible. And then DVDs, good grief. Is there no end to it? So here we are. So we started renting videos for our customers, and we started using video internally for training and for communications, right? And so we had our own internal video production company team. They would go out and they would create videos and distribute them to the stores just to keep up to speed on what was going on. 1986, we opened our own credit union, WSU. We were also members of the Penfield Credit Union, Alice and I. And so we used to, when we were talking about our bank accounts, we would talk about whether we were getting money from PIFCU or WIFCU. So my credit union friends weren't as amused about that. But anyway, over time, the credit union became a little bit unwieldy, and so we sold it to ESL. And so all the members at Wegmans Credit Union became members of ESL. Kodak time there. Okay, 90s, 91, Strive for 5. Remember Strive for 5? Strive for 5, what?
Fruits and veggies.
Fruits and vegetables, 5 servings of fruits and vegetables, right? The FDA said if you're eating 5 servings of fruits and vegetables every day, you're going to be healthier. Doesn't mean you have to eat that on top of everything else. What they're getting at is if you eat 5 servings of fruits and vegetables, there's probably a few servings of something else you're not eating, and that's going to help, right? You know, it's going to be less, you know, carbs or something on the side. And so you got to go for the Strive for 5. So we became big proponents of this. That became a deal for us back in 91. 92, we came out with the Food You Feel Good About label. All right, yellow banner. You still see this around, right? You're sure? What does the Food You Feel Good About label mean? This is your test. Fresh, healthy. What is not in a Food You Feel Good About product?
Preservatives.
Preservatives, right? What else?
Salt.
So now they got salt in some of them, not much. Lower. Artificial ingredients, thank you, okay? And artificial colors, okay? No artificial ingredients, no artificial colors, okay? And no preservatives in food you feel good about. Very good stuff. Also in 1992, continuous improvement. E.Wegman read a book. It was called The Machine That Changed the World. Anybody read The Machine That Changed the World? If you get a chance to read it, don't. I'm telling you, it's painful. It's written by 3 MIT engineers. Right? Doesn't that sound compelling? It basically outlines the creation and development of the Toyota production system, which became the benchmark for total quality management and lean operations throughout the world. Okay? And so this was kind of a new thing back in the day. It became obvious that there was something going on here in the 80s, 70s and 80s, when all of a sudden people started buying, you know, all these Japanese-made vehicles because they were smaller, they were more efficient, they got better gas mileage because the price of gas was starting to go up, and they didn't break down as much. You know, the quality was really built in. And so Danny said, this is something that we can use in our company, and so we adopted the philosophy of continuous improvement. Huge training initiative throughout the company. I was pleased to be involved in that one. It was very cool, and it really changed the way we look at how we do things and how we make decisions, right? In God we trust, all others bring data, okay? So, so if you're trying to sell something, you're trying to get your idea across, you better measure something and find out, prove that it does what you think it's going to do so that you can sell your idea, okay? Also in 92, we opened up a new office building on Wegmans Market Street. This is out farther west from our Brooks Avenue location. It's where Charlie Avenue crosses and 490 comes in, and what is that? West Side Drive. Charlie keeps going, and then
204?
was that Jetway? I think comes in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So Jetview Drive. That's it. And so right in there, and so we have a huge complex out there. It started with one office building, the one on the left. We built the second one a few years later, and there's also the meat depot is out there. The freezer warehouse is out there, distribution center, our culinary innovation center, which is where the marinated meats, right? Lemon garlic chicken, right? Marinated, yeah, okay, like that. Honey mustard, pork tenderloins, okay? Those things, those are all marinated out at that location. And our cheese caves, where all the cheese is aged, right out there at this location. So it's a pretty big complex out there that we have at Market Street. 1993, the WE program. I was talking to somebody about the WE program earlier. Wegmans Early Education, in case you're confused. The WE program is Wegmans Early Education program, and again, this is where Bob and Peggy Wegman were, again, concerned about education in the inner city. And they said, the work scholarship connection is really good, but it's kind of retroactive. It's kind of taking kids once they've gotten through the system and trying to fix them, right? And says, can we do something earlier on so we can get them into a better system? And it turns out that the city Catholic schools at the time were spending less per child on education, but they were getting a much better graduation rate. And so, well, if we can get more kids into the system, then we got a better shot of them graduating, okay, and being more successful in life. And so they started this program. They worked with 6 city Catholic schools and established classrooms in there to allow kids to get in there and get started. Which is kind of starts to become like the full circle, right? You remember when the Catholic diocese was part of the foundation that loaned Bob the money to buy the company, and now he kind of comes back around full circle and has this donation to the diocese to help get these kids involved in this program. It was really quite amazing. Worked out well. And we end up in Pennsylvania. First time outside of New York State. Opened our store in Erie, PA in 1993. 1996, Chase-Pitkin opens a store down in Elmira, actually in Big Flats, a little bit north of town. It will be the last Chase-Pitkin store to be opened. Sorry about that. 1997, we get involved in the HACCP program. What is HACCP? Hazard Analysis of Critical Control Points. This is a food manufacturing process that was developed by Pillsbury for NASA. Because when astronauts are going to be going up into space and spending a lot of time up there, you got to make sure that the food that they were sending up there with them was wholesome and safe and would last for a long time. And so they created this process to ensure that that was done. In 97, in the mid-90s, the seafood industry started to adopt this. And so they started to apply this to the fishing industry from the boats, as my seafood guy Carl Salmon said, from the boat to the throat. We couldn't quite get it that far, but at least we could get it from the boat to the case where the customer would buy it. Once it's in your hands, it's up to you, okay? Got to do what you got to do. But it was a way to maintain and make sure that a critical control point was any place where things could go wrong, and you would put systems in place to make sure that that didn't happen, okay? And so you were able to guarantee that this food would be good and wholesome when it arrived at the store and when it came out on the shelf. It was, actually, we were the only retailer that had a HACCP certified employee in each one of our stores, okay? So that was, that's how important we thought that was to do. 1997, we ended up on the first 100 best list. Forbes comes up their list, 100 best companies to work for. It was actually based on a book by a couple of gentlemen several years earlier. Levering and Moskowitz, they wrote this book, 100 Best Companies to Work For in America. We were mentioned in the book. And they started a company. The book was very successful, so they started a company called the Great Places to Work Institute, and hired themselves out to Fortune magazine, because Fortune magazine loves to publish lists. They just don't like to do the work. And so they said, as long as you guys come up with a list, we'll publish it. They said, okay, fine, we'll do that. And so they came up with their process for going through this competition to get on the list of 100 best companies to work for. We have been on the list every year for the past 27 years. So there. 1998, hey, you remember this website? Yee. You couldn't do a whole lot here. You could look up the occasional product, you could look up some recipes and things like that, but there wasn't a whole lot of interaction going on just yet. It was still relatively new. But we did. We got on Wegmans.com was launched, and we were on the web, all right? Also became the title sponsor of the LPGA. You might remember this. Turned into a major event. It was $1 million purse that Bob Wegman put on that. And we also had a meeting in the Jiva Theater. We didn't have a big enough facility to have a company-wide meeting with all the leadership in the company. We're talking about every store manager, we're talking about every director and every vice president and all the leaders of the company. There were several hundred people that we needed to get into a room. And so we had to rent out Jiva Theater to do this. And it was a pretty simple meeting, right? Stage was dark, 2 chairs up there, little table, floor lamp. Bob Wegman's in one chair, Danny Wegman's in the other. Bob Wegman gets up and he talks about how the company started and how it came to where we were in 1999. And he sits down and Danny starts to speak. And Danny says, whenever I've wondered about what to do, I always go back to a speech that my dad may have never delivered. Remember the speech? Okay. And he said, we've come to call it the I'm a Merchant speech. And it goes like this. He said, I am a merchant, and I have, therefore, my own philosophy about merchandising. And that is to do something that no one else is doing and give a customer a choice they don't have at the moment. This is the only reason for being in business. To my way of thinking, this is the way it should be. Good merchandising resolves itself into delivering a service in such a way as to make it difficult for your competitors to emulate. This is the basic premise upon which we at Wegmans operate. Pretty short, pretty sweet, but it became quite profound, right? All of a sudden it was like, okay, what do we do differently? What do we do that other companies don't do? Other companies aren't putting HACCP certified people in their seafood departments. Other companies weren't having a staff of people work their parking lots. Other companies weren't publishing a magazine or putting chefs in their stores or teaching people cooking techniques, or the list goes on and on and on and on. And it's things like that that required a huge amount of effort, a huge amount of investment, but it set us apart. And it made us different from our competitors. If all you got to compete on is price, that's not a fun game to be in, right? Okay. Your prices have to be reasonable, right? They've got to be affordable for people. We have a whole line of products that we're the cheapest ones in the market on, okay? If you want to buy, a bag of salmon fillets, for frozen fillets for $10, that's fine. If you want to buy the $55 a pound fresh caught salmon that came in from Alaska on a plane this morning, we got that too at certain times of the year, okay? We cover all bases, okay? So this was the I'm a Merchant speech, and this was kind of launched Danny's vision for the whole culinary side of the business. Prepared foods, restaurants, chefs in the stores, etc. Okay? He wanted to be more than just a grocery store. He wanted us to be a place that could help customers make great meals easy, as we finally started to define this, right? Okay? So that was a big thing for us as a company. That was huge. 1999, we opened up in another state. Went to Princeton, New Jersey. Oh, we're getting late now. Here we go. Remember 2001? Remember Menu Magazine? How many of you still have every copy of Menu Magazine? Right? Right? Yeah, We get calls from people who say, I have a full set of Menu Magazines. Would you like them? God love you. No, we have 60 of them. Right? And I still have the full set. There's still recipes that came in there that we still go back to, right, and do. It was a very cool thing. And it was like, that was a gamble. That was crazy, right? How are you going to publish a magazine? Well, we're not going to run print ads anymore. Really? Oh, really? Is that right? That's what you're going to do? You're going to cut out the print ads, we're going to take that money, and we're going to put it in making a magazine. Oh, well, what a great idea. Let's do that, all right? Turns out, it took a few issues before we finally got our feet under us with it, but it turned out to be a great way to go to market. The menu magazine, when it came out, became the playbook for the entire company, right? The stores would take the magazine and say, okay, here's the products that are going on sale, these are going to be promoted, and we're going to start, featuring these and doing these recipes and all that, right? And everybody was kind of rowing all in the same direction. It was a great, great thing. In 2001, Danny now was asked to give a speech at Syracuse University. And so he was, okay, he'll do that. And being a privately held company, we don't like to spill the beans on a lot of things that are going on, But he wanted to speak about something that was meaningful for people. And so he started thinking about how he defined the values of the company, how we operate, kind of along the lines of our philosophy, but a little bit different take on it. So he said, what are our values? How do we list those out? So he started jotting those down, and that became the speech he was going to deliver. It turned out he was scheduled to deliver the speech 1 week after 9/11. So he goes to Syracuse, and he delivers the speech. And as he talks about these values, all of a sudden those values start becoming a lot more meaningful. They carried more weight based on what was going on in our country at the time, right? So these things that we talk about caring about the well-being and success of each person, high standards being a way of life, making a difference in every community we serve, respecting and listening to our people, empowering our people to make decisions that improve their work and benefit our customers and our company, right? And so these then became our who we are values, as we call them. And they still sit right alongside our philosophy, alongside a positioning statement that says, here are the things that we do differently from everybody else. And our measures, here are the things we measure to show how successful we are. Right? So it's become, that became quite a bit of the philosophy of our organization. 2002, we went to consistent low pricing. Danny said, you know what, if we were a publicly held company and we did this, 6 months in, we all would have been fired. Because it took almost a year for people to get it, right? It's like, because all of a sudden we just pulled the ads, there were no more sales, right? We asked people, do you like sales? Do you like ads? Do you like BOGO? Buy one, get one. Yeah, that's cool. Or would you rather have consistent low prices where the prices are the same all the time? Oh no, we like the ads, let's go with the ads. Oh, okay. Did you ever go to Walmart? Yeah. You ever go to BJ's?
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes. Why? When our stuff's on sale, it's cheaper now. Why do you go there? Well, because I need it, I want it, and I want it. Oh, okay. So your actions are speaking louder than your words. Right. So we went with consistent low pricing. And we took a hit for about a year. It took a while, but then it finally started coming up. People were saying, oh, okay, I get it now. All right, I understand. And the thing is, it's not only easier on people to do their shopping because they don't have to chase down, what's on sale, chase down the ads, but it also becomes easier on the organization, right? You remember getting the videotape in the mail? Get the videotape that came in a green box, VCR tape from Wegmans, where Danny tells a story about consistent low pricing. He had like a Ross Perot thing going on, right? Where you had the charts, this exact and everything. But he was saying, we get bargains from our suppliers, like, Jif peanut butter or something. They'll say twice a year they'll give you a big price break, and so you can sell them, for 2 for 1. And it's like, well, just get rid of that. Just take those dollars and put them right into the cost of goods and give us a consistent price all the way across, so we can sell it for a decent price every day. Oh, okay, fine. So that's what they did, right? And so we had to go to our vendors and do that. But finally, it came around, and so we didn't have to worry about filling up, our warehouses and our stores with, skids of peanut butter and building huge displays and then having to figure out what to do with the stuff when the sale's over, and storing it on a skid in the back room for whatever, right? So now we have this constant flow of product kind of going in and out. It's much more efficient, earlier, and easier for everybody. 2004, we went into Virginia, opened a store in Sterling, which is just south of Dulles Airport. So we affectionately call it our Dulles store. And in 2005, we were #1 on the Fortune list of 100 best companies to work for in America, which Bob Wegman called the culmination of his life's work. Right? Being named #1, the best company to work for in America. I could not agree more. Thank you very much. Also, Danny was promoted then to CEO. Colleen was promoted to president. Colleen is Danny's oldest daughter. He has another daughter, Nicole. She also works for the company. We'll get to her in a little bit. 2005, we opened a store in Maryland, Hunt Valley. It's our first store in Maryland. Another state, Hunt Valley. 2006. Right? Well, how many of you miss Chase-Pitkin? All right. Oh, yeah, I know. All right. Thank you for that. All right. It was tough. It was the right decision. We had competed well against Grossman's. We competed well against Heckinger's, against Builder Square. When Lowe's and Home Depot came to town, it was pretty much, okay, that's going to be a little bit more than we can handle. Trying to be the best in any industry is tough. Trying to be the best in two separate industries puts both of them at risk. And so the decision was made then, look at, our chips are in the food market business, okay? Chase-Pitkin amounted to, a very small percentage of the total company. And so we could not put at risk the effort that needed to go into keeping the food markets up to speed for the sake of this business here, which was obviously going to be going through quite a bit of a struggle going against these two behemoths, okay? And so we decided then, Bob Wegman decided we were going to close the Chase-Pitkin stores, and so close them they did. And shortly thereafter, of course, we had this, April of 2006, the passing of Robert Wegman. I was getting choked up with this part, but I remember talking to one of my colleagues, and they were saying, isn't it a shame, we hire so many people every year, and we're going to have all these people working for Wegmans, and they never had a chance to meet Bob Wegman, they never had a chance to work with Bob Wegman. Yeah, isn't that a shame? And I said, yeah, it is kind of, but the good news is that you didn't have to know Bob Wegman to know about Bob Wegman, right? You look around, you look at his company, you look at his stores, you look at his people, you look at his customers, right? And you can tell, you look at his family, right? I mean, the DNA runs hard in those folks, okay? I mean, they shared his thoughts and his philosophies and his desires to run a business, and they've taken it beyond, okay, in different directions. Mostly because there are new things going on that, weren't happening when Bob was around. You didn't have to run into COVID either, So, at any rate, a great loss, a great man. Yeah, you miss him. We miss him. In 2010, we launched the app. You had the app on your phone now, you could make a list, okay? Now you can do stuff on your phone, that's cool. All right, 2017, Danny went up to chairman, made Colleen the CEO, and named Nicole the senior vice president of the Wegman brand. Okay, so she is in charge of that. In 2019, we moved into our next state, North Carolina. Note the southward movement. Note how it stopped. We'll talk about that in a minute. In the 20s, in 22, we opened a store in Washington, D.C. and one in Wilmington, Delaware. All right, and now we are in New York City, right? Opened a store in Brooklyn, Navy Yard. They were doing a whole redo of that whole area and putting retail and living space in there. And they asked us to come in, and they cut us a deal, and so it made it worthwhile. We'd always wanted to be in New York City, but real estate was just, But when COVID came along, all of a sudden, people realized if I didn't have to go to work in New York City, I didn't have to live in New York City, and so people started moving out of the city. And so the property values started to sign a little bit, right? And this building, on the lower picture here, was known as the Wanamaker Building. It was the home of the Wanamaker department stores back in the day. Most recently, it was the home to a Kmart, occupied the lower two floors. They closed shortly after COVID, and the landlords were looking for somebody to lease the space, and they were willing to deal. And so we said, fine, let's go. And so we got our store in Lower Manhattan at Astor Place in New York City, and we got our store in Brooklyn. Okay, looks very good. So today, we've been in business for over 100 years. We got over 110 stores, and more to come. 54,000 employees and doing about $12.5 billion in sales. So that's where we stand now. Maybe in another 100 years, somebody will come back and tell you about what's happened since then. That's where we are today. I just want to say thank you. Anybody have questions? I'll take a question.
If you have a question, because we're recording this, I'd like to take a mic to you, if that's okay. Anybody got any questions or comments? I gotta play Phil Donnie.
So I had a question about, every store has a unique store number assigned to it. How are those determined and are they reused?
I'll answer the second one first. Yes, they are reused. I lost track. When I came over from Chase-Pitkin had like 14 stores or something like that. And I knew all the store numbers of Chase-Pitkin stores. I got into Wegmans, and they had, I think at the time, like 40 stores. I'm like, okay, I'm not getting in that. I can't do it, right? But yeah, after a while, the stores closed, that number is retired, and then it can be brought back around again. So yes, I think most of the Chase-Pitkin store numbers were all in the 40s and 50s, have been recycled into newer Wegmans stores. So yes, good question. Yes, ma'am.
I want to say thank you. This was fantastic and so interesting. I'm not from Greece originally. I've only lived out here about 18 years. But I know some of these stores, and I do remember my parents were living in Greece when they built the Mount Reed store. And that was so unusual to go to it. I really have enjoyed your presentation. Thank you so much. Thank you, Bill, for having him.
What was the history of the store over on Bay Road?
Store over on Bay Road. Bay Road Webster or Bay Road down? Bay Road Rochester. Good, you know, so somebody else was saying, Bay and Culver or something around there? Okay. Somewhere around there, yeah. It's like opened up in the 50s, was open for a while and then closed. Yeah, store number 1. And I have no idea why they named it number 1, because it wasn't the first store. Trust me on that. All right, because it came along, 4 years after. But yeah, I think it might have been when they first started coming up with numbers, they put them in alphabetical order, and Bay was at the top of the list. And so you get that one, the number 1. Which I just made that up, but that sounds as logical as anything I can come up with. Okay. Yes, over here.
I'm glad you mentioned the Bay and Culver. That was the first time I started at 16 years old in 1951, and that was my first job there at Bay and Culver. And I was wondering why they never showed up in the pictorials on your screen up here. But the other question to go along with it, I see that I recently was in the store, the Wegmans store, up on Route 9 in Boston, Chestnut Hill area, up by Brookline. And that's a very interesting store because it's working at 2 different levels in that store because all the parking is underneath the store. So great job there too, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. These city stores that we end up going into, okay, where we can finally find our way in, like Chestnut Hill, Astor Place. There's a couple in Washington. There's one in Washington, D.C. We're in the old Fannie Mae offices, okay, which is a very old historic building. They actually tore out underneath the back of the building and tore the basement out, and we slid the store into it, okay, to put it in there. So, when we build a suburban store, we don't really have a prototype, but we know how to build a store on 40 acres of land, right? When you're going into a box that's already built and you got to retrofit and, shove all these square pegs in the round holes, that's a bit of a chore. So our design services group, they earn their money over there trying to figure out how to put these things in. So thanks for mentioning that one. I appreciate it.
Hey, over here. You're really making me.
Yeah, you're getting your exercise, right?
Yes, I've been gone for 50 years and I just got back from North Carolina.
I've been gone for 50 years, and so good to be back. But anyway, they're all asking me when you're going to build the Wegmans down there in North Carolina. Where? Okay, good, because I was near Asheville, that was in Hendersonville. But anyway, it's good to be back in Rochester and where I was raised.
Great, welcome to that, okay. Great, who else? Other question, got one over here? There we go, I'll chase it down, that's okay. Sorry, I'll come to you. It's easier this way. Poor Bill. There you go.
I was just wondering, what's the #1 selling item at Wegmans?
Historically, it's always been bananas. Bananas. Now, bananas are interesting, right? We have a special room in our produce warehouse, which is called the banana room. Because as bananas ripen, they give off gases, and there are certain gases that will cause them to ripen faster, and so we keep them sealed off from the rest of the produce so that they'll stay, unripened longer, right? So when you get to the store, you always get the green bananas still have a ways to go, right? And you get in there, go around the other side here, come around the other way. Yeah, I'm coming for you, I'm coming for you. I am. I'm trying to get there now.
It's funny you mentioned bananas, and everybody talks about inflation, but bananas have been 49 cents a pound for 10 years. Every time I walk into Wegmans, I'm waiting for 59 cents, and I'll know inflation hit.
Okay. I'm sorry.
You didn't answer my question. When are you going to go to Florida?
When I don't know. I won't say never, because never is an awful long time. As you could tell, right, we were moving south, right, down along that way. Now, the thing with Wegmans is we only open like 2 or 3 stores a year, right? We've been open like 3 stores a year. Walmart's been opening 300 a year. Aldi's is going to open up like 1,000 stores or something over the next couple of years. We opened 3. Walmart had a pilot program for a small neighborhood grocery chain, okay? It had 110 stores in it. At the time, we had like 80. That was their pilot program. That was the test drive, right? It was bigger than our whole chain. Okay, so we don't grow fast, but we grow consistently. There's always something going on. There's always something in the hoop, We were heading to Florida. We were going south, right along the eastern seaboard, right? We were on our way. And then COVID hit. And then it said, oh, you can build a store in New York City. 10 million people live over there. Oh. Okay, we wanted to be there before. Maybe we'll do that now. We'll hold off and heading farther south. We're in Carolina. That's good. We're going to put a few more stores down there. They're on the list. There's another store. There's another one coming up in Long Island. There's another one actually looking at a site in Connecticut. And who saw the latest news? Pittsburgh, right? All the Steelers fans out there, right? You're going to get a chance to take a shot at it, right? Very good. So they're all very excited, okay? Good. What else? Any other questions? Yes?
How many different warehouses are there?
How many different, there's a lot of different warehouses. There are 3 main distribution centers. So one in Rochester, New York, and actually in Rochester there were 3 locations. There's Brooks Avenue, Wegmans Market Street that I told you about before, and there's also out in Henrietta where Chase-Pitkin's main office used to be, is our general merchandise distribution center, okay? A few years ago, we opened our newest one, but before that, about 15 years ago, we opened one in southern PA, okay? And there's a produce and a frozen warehouse and a fresh warehouse down there. And so that distributes and takes care of the southern PA stores down into Maryland, Jersey, and all that. And then most recently, we opened one in southern Virginia near Richmond. So again, the plan heading south, distribution center, distribution center, distribution center, so we can feed these stores going down the coastline. Okay? Yeah. Hi.
Does Wegmans have any plan to go against some of the bigger markets?
Does Wegmans have any plans to go against some of the bigger markets? Well, we compete with Publix actually down in Virginia. There was a chain in Virginia in Richmond called Crops. It's a family-owned chain. And the latest generation decided to go into the bakery business, and then they bailed on that. on the food market. So they sold the food markets off, and Publix ended up acquiring a bunch of them. Meanwhile, we already had plans to build a couple of stores on them, so we're competing against Publix down there right now. We compete, who's the largest food retailer in the country? Walmart. We compete with them everywhere, okay? We compete with Kroger's, I don't think so yet, because they haven't quite moved over in our neck of the woods yet. They're more central located. But Publix, we compete against Giant Eagle, them, Winn-Dixie, who's down there? Yeah. So if it's in, we're not too worried about the competition. We're worried about the location, right? The location, we need a dense population, okay? And, so they can support one of our stores. We invest, not dense that way. Yeah, right, yeah, they're pretty dense. So, and when it can support one of our stores, we don't do, small stores all over the place. We do large stores, require a lot of volume in order to keep that going, okay? Our Pittsburgh store, a couple of years ago, had over 1,000 people on the payroll. Okay, so you have to do some volume in order to support that and provide the level of service we do. Well, we're done? Oh, okay. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. And thank you for shopping at Wegmans, where every day you get our best.
No, we know. Upcoming second Tuesdays of the month programs from the Greece Historical Society.
Anyway, we got a couple programs coming up. Next month is Unsung, Be Unsung, and it's going to be about Rochester women who you've never heard about. And in March, it's going to be What's Your Game? The history of gaming, board games. And in April, it will be Before Jackie and the history of the Negro Leagues in Rochester. And in May, for those of you who know Marie Poignant, who's quite the author of local history, especially Survivor history, and she's co-author of our Pioneer Families book. She's going to talk about the history of Holy Cross Church, Lake Avenue.
Times, dates, and locations for the following programs are subject to change. Please check our Facebook page for updated information. Want to learn more from the Greece Historical Society and Museum? Then click that subscribe button. Hit that bell icon to get notified when there's new content coming from the Greece Historical Society. You can visit us on the web at GreeceHistoricalSociety.org. You can find us on Facebook at Greece Historical Society. And you can stop in at the Greece Historical Society at 595 Long Pond Road.